Welcome to the Antisocial Podcast. This is episode 162. This week's guest, we have Mike Hohnen, but before we kick into it, if we haven't met already, my name's Andy Dowling. Nice to meet you. And if you don't know already, I play bass in the Australian heavy metal band Lord. And if you love a bit of old school heavy metal, you can go over to lord.net.au. Well, I've got all the social media links over there. We've got video clips, streaming music, our whole back catalogue. We've got an online store. There's lots of historic information there, lots of fancy photos, lots of cool things to click on. Lots of stuff there. So go over to lord.net.au, go and give our music a crack. If you love it and you've never heard it before, shoot me a message. Let me know what you think. I'd love to get your feedback. And we've got a new album coming soon, so make sure you follow us on all the socials to keep up to date with any announcements. And of course, I'll keep you all up to date via the podcast as well. So stay tuned. In addition to playing in a heavy metal band, I also host the Self-Starter podcast, which is all about small business, self-employment, and freelancing. So depending on where you are in your journey in the self-employment world, if you are, you could be about to launch your own business or running your own business. You could be a freelancer. You could just be doing a side hustle and earning a bit of pocket money on the side, whatever it might be. Or you know somebody that is on their own journey, you can go to selfstarter.com.au, check out the podcast, which season 1's now over. That finished at the end of 2018, and season 2 will kick off mid-year 2019. And but there's a whole bunch of blog posts there as well. So you can go back and listen to the old episodes and recording into the new year as well for season 2. So lots of fun stuff over there and something that I'm very passionate about. So check that out, selfstarter.com.au. This week's shout out, if you're new to the podcast, each and every week I thank somebody that supports me in a whole range of different ways. It could be things such as messages of encouragement, guest recommendations. It could be shouting me a beer via the PayPal button over at andysocial.net. It could be buying some merchandise from the online store. It could be a review anywhere on the internet, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher. It could be an old web forum, whatever it might be. It doesn't matter. It all helps. It keeps the podcast going, keeps me fueled and motivated. It means a hell of a lot to me. So thank you so much to everybody that continues to support. But each and every week, I thank one person, put them on public record. And it's my little way of giving back, my little way of saying thank you. It's the least I could do. So this week's shout out is for Dan Ralph. Dan is the guitarist in Melbourne band Naberis. I'm going to butcher names. I'm, as you guys know, been listening for a while. I'm hopeless with pronunciation, like really, really bad. But Dan from Naberis has sent me a message not too long ago, just explaining that he's only just listened to the podcast for the first time very recently, and he's just really enjoyed the podcast, really enjoyed the conversation and the way that I guess I'm approaching the guests as well. So Dan, thank you so much for the message and encouragement. It's funny when we do these podcasts, you know that people are listening, but you don't often get a lot of messages or feedback on certain things. You might get a couple of comments here and there, but when you get somebody that takes the time to send a message through, it's really, really cool, and it's just a little bit of fuel to the fire. It keeps me motivated and pumped up. So thank you so much, Dan. If anyone wants to check out Dan's band, Naberis, I'm probably butchering that. You can go to facebook.com/NABERUS band. They've got a 2018 release called Hollow. Go and check that out there. The styles are kind of like melodic death thrash. So if you love that sort of stuff, go and check it out. That's facebook.com/NABERUS BAND. And their latest album is called Hollow. Check it out. Thanks, Dan. Shoot me a message when you hear this, and I'm going to send you out some stuff in the post because we all love getting something in the mail. So thank you very much, Dan. This week's episode is with Mike Hohnen. Mike is a freelance writer, a journalist. He's the co-founder of The Neversphere as well, which you can find over at nvrsphr.com.au. I'll put links in the show notes, guys. Do not fret. And Mike is a jack of all trades, and I mentioned this in the podcast. He completely lives that freelance lifestyle. He's been doing a lot of great work over the years. He's interviewed so many great artists and bands. He does a lot of great written pieces, and he's written for a number of big names over the years as well, and he's done a lot of stuff with music feeds. Just recently wrote a few articles for Download. He just does a lot of great stuff, and so the things that we discussed in this episode, I'll have in the show notes over at andysocial.net, or if you click through on your podcast player, you should be able to see all the clickable links in there as well. So if you want to check out more of what Mike's up to, go and check out those links. And like any guest on the podcast, please go back, check out those links, those contact details, and make sure that you let these guests know if you really enjoyed those particular conversations with them. So it's the least that we could all do, especially for me, to give back and say thanks for them sacrificing time to have a chin wag with me, or at least AKA me chew their ear off. This chat's really cool. We cover a whole heap of different things. We really talk about a lot of the freelance mindset, discipline, writing, things like that. But we also talk about how we as people interpret news and information and media and all sorts of stuff in the internet, and how that's all sort of is woven into our lives. So there's heaps of stuff here. A really, really good chat. I'm really psyched. I mean, this podcast is so good because I get to meet so many great people and use the podcast as an excuse to build some really good relationships with people. And I'm just so happy that I've been able to meet someone like Mike and have this really cool conversation, because we certainly will have more conversations in the future. So if you want to follow Mike, you can follow Mike Hohnen Live on Twitter and Instagram. As I said before, just click through on the show notes. You'll be able to find all his contact details. But enough of me. Please enjoy this really, really cool chat with Mike Hohnen. I went and did a bit of sticky beaking around on the old internet, and you're a jack of all trades.
I try to be. I'm worried that I have an uncle who operates in the music industry as well with the same name as me. So I hope that you've not seen any of his accolades and attributed them to me. But damn it, I'll take the credit for him anyway.
Okay? So I'll actually touch on that, because I was doing a little bit of sticky beaking and I did see another name out there, same name. Is this Mike up in Darwin?
Yes, yeah. So this
Skinny Fish Music?
So from Skinny Fish Music, yeah. So he operates out of Darwin and is, I think the dude won something like 800 arias at the end of last year. So I got a lot of congratulation messages on Facebook, but I couldn't really take any of the glory.
There you go. Because I looked into it, I'm like, oh wow, you've done quite a bit. And then I looked in, I saw a photo, and I thought, no, that's not you. And so, yeah.
But fortunately, he's got a good sense of humor as well. So I haven't been hit with a cease and desist yet.
I love it. But I mean, you definitely are a jack of all trades. I mean, most of the stuff appears to be around writing and the different facets of writing. But I mean, you're working in a studio as well. You've done a lot of other stuff out and about. And I guess that's probably the wonders of the music industry, is that, most people don't have, well, I wouldn't say the luxury, but most people don't have the luxury to be able to just do one thing only. And so for you, is it more of ticking a box of you being stimulated and doing a whole bunch of different things all the time? Or is it more of a necessity because it's just that freelance lifestyle where you have to do a number of different things and be multi-skilled?
I think it's both, but for me, it was the latter, which kind of was the bigger sort of contributing factor towards it. I was fortunate enough to get some really amazing jobs in some great companies where I was doing one thing, but I would just burn myself out. So after something embarrassing like 6 months, of doing that, I would just find that I was burnt out, I was bored, and not because I'm some awesome, exciting guy. I just don't have that part of me that could retain that interest. So it ends up, I end up being the dickhead of the office, the one that's kind of bringing down everything. So I realized after about, 18 months of my last job that I need that. I don't know what it is. I could justify it by saying it's a personality trait. It might not be anything that, cool. It might just be I have ADD. But and so I realized I got to do a bunch of different things at once to keep my brain active. And so when my last proper job was working at as label publicist for Inertia Music, and that was one of the most incredible eye-opening experiences of my life. But again, I started having that little, that voice in my head just started coming in saying, do more things. So ever since Inertia, that's what I've been doing, just whatever I can get my hands on. But as you mentioned as well, that's kind of the only way to survive as a freelancer as well. So I guess I'm kind of fortunate in the sense that my brain wants to do that. And then, I need to do that to keep the lights on, keep the cat fed.
Oh, for sure. And I think I can relate to it a little bit. And I don't know whether I'm on the money here with you as well. With working in, and I mean, Inertia would still be a fantastic job, but I guess there would be a little bit of a traditional aspect to it as well, where you're working for a larger company. There's expectations and targets and things that you have to achieve being in that role. Do you find that when you're relying on yourself and your own output is equaling what is returned, that's far more encouraging for you than sort of being at the mercy of an employer? So being a freelancer sort of helps you it gives you a bit of, I guess, maybe mental control over what's going on.
Yeah, and it's something that you get when you get a win, or when you tick something off, or you finish a job. The kill chain starts and ends with you, so you kind of immediately feel that immediate sense of gratification. And according to my star sign as a Leo, that's something I need. I don't know whether or not that's real, but I read it once, so let's go with it.
Yeah, why not?
But yeah, I do appreciate that as a freelancer. You don't have that. You don't have to wait. The chain of command isn't there. The checks and balances and the politics that come with that. I hate office politics. I'm just I'm like cringing as I think about them. So the less, basically, it comes down to less office politics. What job has no office politics? Oh yeah, the one where I'm just working with myself. And so I do really love not having to worship a chain of command or adhere to all these rules and standards.
And I guess over time, for you, you're doing a lot of great work and putting pieces together for some big names. And I think over time, like anybody that's sort of doing freelance work, you start to get to a point where there's a degree of momentum and a degree of network and contacts and things that you can leverage off, that you can start to pick and choose the type of work that you do, which sometimes you don't have that luxury working in a traditional sort of capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm quite fortunate enough to have pretty recently, like I'd say in the past year, have gotten to the point where I can leverage these contacts. I can even be a little bit cheeky and message multiple contacts at once for the same thing and kind of go with whoever offers me the best deal. And but that's only a very recent development. But once you get to that point, that's really the game changer. It's one of those things where it takes. It's so cliche to say, but you bust your ass for 7 years to wake up one day when you get the opportunity to do that. But then once you get there, once you have that power of leverage, I don't want to say power of leverage. It sounds a bit maniacal, doesn't it? Once you have the ability to leverage that kind of stuff, that's really when you feel the weight kind of get lifted off your chest.
Yeah, definitely. Did you find when you first started getting into, I guess, that freelance capacity that you sort of felt not forced, but you had to take on a lot of stuff that maybe wasn't stimulating, wasn't exactly what you wanted to do, but it was as a necessity?
Yeah, I know, without naming names, because I don't think it was actually the product I was working. I think it was my attitude at the time.
Yeah, right.
I think that you can always find something good in something. We've as a freelancer, a luxury. You should be able to. You got to be able to. Lift up your visor and find something good in the things you're working on, because it always is. But I wasn't like that. I was a bit of a brat with it and just kind of taking cash jobs and just being like, yeah, quick, prove this to my dad that I can make this work. I'll do anything that comes my way. So you end up doing a bunch of jobs which you don't believe in. You see the fans, you see there's a reaction to it, you see there's a market for it, but you don't believe in it. The minute that happens, you may as well return the money, because you're not going to do an effective job on anything. And so when this happened with journalism, this happened when I started doing freelance PR for various bands and stuff. Some of it was great, but some of it I was purely doing for the money. And I didn't like how that made me feel inside, as much as, we've all got to do it, but I didn't really like how that made me feel. And I think that if I didn't correct that, and if I continued to kind of go down that road of just accepting any job for cash, I probably would have just burnt out entirely. Probably got a job pulling beers somewhere, because I would have lost all the passion for it. Not to say there's anything wrong with pulling beers. We need people need to pull up beers.
We definitely do. But was there a point in time that you can remember, or was it sort of a gradual change where you went from this sort of mechanical sort of approach to it all to sort of seeing the bigger picture, where you start to think, well, there's some more meaning to it? Because you've written on your LinkedIn page, there's always a story to be told, and I like that, because for me, and that's something that I've been really trying to work on, that there's always something that you don't want to do, or there's an environment that you're in that you don't enjoy, or people that you have to interact with. But it's sort of like the silver lining, finding the silver lining of a situation. And I always try to see, without it, I can't word it better, but I always say to myself, what can I take advantage of in this situation? And so for you, writing, was there a point where you sort of looked at something and went, like, I can get something out of this for myself, or to be able to get a message through something that might seem a little bit mundane or a little bit sort of shallow as far as a topic, but I can dig in deeper and make more of it for a bigger purpose, rather than just for that mechanical aspect of ticking a box and moving on to the next job?
Yeah, and I did. There was this moment, I think I went the most roundabout way of kind of servicing that feeling or that idea. And that's when I just went and started my own website called the Neversphere with a friend of mine. We just started to do it because I kind of had this idea. This was after just an extended period of time of just doing bad work. Not working with bad clients or bad content, but just doing it badly. And then, my heart wasn't in it. This was kind of at the end of what I was talking about before, when I was just accepting all these jobs, just doing anything that came my way to prove a point to my dad that, I'd made a good career move. And I was just completely burnt out. But I had this idea that content served a bigger purpose in all of this. And it wasn't within the confines of the industry. And by that, I mean, this kind of stock standard industry, I'm doing air quotes, it's industry content that we expect, the interviews that you see with these industry interviews, it starts off, oh, you've just released this new album. Tell me, how was it working with the producer? These Australian tour dates where you're looking forward to coming back. That I felt as though there was more to do with content than that. But no one wanted it. No one wanted the risk. Everyone was just like, no, just shut up. Just ask them about the album. Just shut up. Just ask them about the tour. That's what that's what they're here for. Don't move. Don't act above your station. And so I started the Neversphere to be like, nah, fuck this. Like, there's got to be a demand for this kind of stuff. The people want to read. So that's what I did, and that's what I mean. Like the most those roundabout way of getting there. I started this website. I just started doing things off my own back. There's no money. It's hemorrhaging cash, this website. My friend and I were in a position fortunate enough where we could kind of afford to lose $100 a month to it because we're having fun. So then I started making this content that was a little left of center, things that weren't focusing on the latest announcement, that something still related and something still relevant that these artists and these bands could share. And the bands loved it. I started doing these weird things where I would get, say a band is just about to break up. I would, and they do I don't know why bands do like breakup interviews. It's a bit weird, but that's neither here nor there. But instead of just kind of speaking to this band about how fucking sad their reality is that they have to break up because they're not making enough money, I said, wait a second, let's make this a moment. Why don't you write like a letter to all these other bands that are about to start? All these bands which are just in the garage right now. Why don't you write a letter to these hypothetical bands, warning them about everything that they're about to go through? And I got a lot of band to do that as they were breaking up. They wrote this kind of, I wish I knew then what I knew now kind of themed piece, addressing it to all these local bands that were starting up, kind of saying like, okay, we're at the end of our career. Here's what you guys should expect throughout yours. And the band loved it. The fans loved it. And that's when it hit me. I went, you know what? This is it. I'm full speed ahead on this because people want this kind of content. They want something different and they want something engaging and unique. And so ever since then, I kind of was able to show people, I was able to show contacts, say, I know you want me to do an interview about the album, but look at this. Why don't we talk about this other thing that this artist is obsessed with? And then we just link to the album at the bottom. And then that started, working for me. And then I kind of got into a really fortunate position where, the people started, editors and people started being like, who can we get to talk to them about something other than the album? And then, fortunately, the right Mike Hohnen came to mind when they had that question.
This is something that I go through myself, and it's like this never-ending challenge where, my circles have always sort of originated around music, and my inner circle's all musicians and mates that play in bands and whatever. So when I started this podcast, I was thinking about, who do I get on? And so it was the easiest sort of thing to just go to your muso mates, but all your muso mates were used to, if you've got a mic in front of your face, you're just going to talk about that same sort of stuff that you mentioned, like, album, tour, how's this one compared to the last one? Is this one going back to the roots? What is it? Blah, blah, blah.
I'm getting sweaty palms just thinking about that line of questioning.
And I saw a lot of other friends that worked in music journalism as well, and had like webzines and different things out there. And even for me as a musician doing interviews over the years as well, you sort of get into this sort of very stock standard way of approaching press. And so for me, I thought, I don't want people to look at me in that same way with what I'm doing with this. And so it became this thing that really ate at me. And I developed a complex out of it because I was so conscious of trying not to do that and find anything else to talk about. And so I had friends of mine hitting me up going, oh, hey, I've got a new album coming out. Let's have a chat. And I'm like, no, I don't want to talk to you when you're trying to do a press run. Or I've got friends who, have got the media lists and they want me to be on the media list. And I'm like, but I don't want to be one of 20 people that are going to talk to this artist in the one day, and I've got a 20-minute allocation, and I'm probably going to be the last one that's going to be asking questions. They're over it. They're in autopilot. And I've got to try and engage in a stimulating conversation with this person, and it's really, really difficult. So for me, I started branching out and finding all sorts of different people, not just musicians, but just anybody that I find interesting. And then over time, using all these little different pieces of information and these stories to try and go back to music and then talk to musicians and extend the conversation. But it's a really challenging thing because you want to dig in deeper. And I think, music's got so much more to give. And the fact that everybody loves music to a degree, but I think for people that are passionate about music, we love it because music tells a story and tells multiple stories, and the content is so varied. But when we start to talk to artists about it, we don't get into those topics. We just talk about the mechanical aspects of being a musician and on tour. So it's a really difficult thing to do. And when you said that, as far as just shifting the perspective a little bit, is really important, but I think a lot of people still haven't quite grasped that concept yet.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like, I don't want to say I'm, ahead of the curve, even though in some ways I happen to find myself in that position because there were around about the same time I started trying to do different content. It seemed as though management, there was just something in the water at the time. I think management for a lot of artists were actively seeking different content. It was almost like on both sides of the fence, people were just being like, fuck this, let's do something different. And so I think that just so happened to time up well with when I wanted to do it. The universe conspired in my favor. That's all it comes down to, just luck. I didn't read the fucking, see it on any smoke or anything like that. But I do feel as though a lot of people haven't quite cottoned on to the fact that this is what everyone wants. The artists want this, their management want this, their publicity want this, and the fans want it. They want content which is, as you mentioned, expands the perspective around the album and tells more of a story than just, we went in the studio this day, we did this on the other day, and then we released the album and then we were touring it. Like, everyone wants it to be different. But I think that there are a lot of writers here that haven't figured that out yet and still kind of operate within that gross blueprint you mentioned before about, just the industry interviews, the press run, just talk about whatever they've been talking about all day. A lot of writers feel comfortable staying in that zone. And I mean, hey, sometimes they get great stuff. Sometimes there's something, I can't think of any examples on my feet, but some of these people come out with interesting ways to ask these boring questions and they get some good results from their artists. But I feel as though not enough, it's like 9 out of 10 interviews that get released, at any given moment are those boring interview ones. And I think that, I don't know how you spread the message throughout freelancers, but I think that we need to spread the message just being like, you guys, it's okay to talk about stuff other than the album with these artists. Be properly researched, but it's okay to talk about other things outside of the album. And it's going to catch on. It will catch on, surely.
And I think the other thing I've noticed, and sort of going on the other end of the spectrum, is that I think when people have started to get a little bit desperate, I think I found a lot of music sites, and this is probably more from a global point of view rather than just Australia, but a lot of music webzines have started to get quite political as well, which I think can be a really good thing. And I think that opens up the conversation to more of sort of a social topics and things where we're all impacted regardless of whether we're passionate about a particular genre of music or not. But I see that there have definitely been publications that have used that in a sense to, from that horrible term clickbait and things like that. And so they've gone down the path of what a lot of mainstream media is doing by trying to grab attention and grab and spark emotion with people, but for the wrong intentions. So it's sort of like you've got one extreme where people have still stuck in a very old format of music press, but then you've got the other extreme where people have gone the complete other end of the spectrum, but are doing it for the reasons to gain attention only, but not to actually create substance. And so you've got to find that medium where people are liberated to be able to talk about lots of different things, but tie it all into music, but make it stimulating and constructive that people get value out of it.
Sure, and I think a really good example is Joe Rogan. And I'm not a fan of the Joe Rogan Experience, I'm frustrated because like 10 years ago, I got all my mates onto it when I was a fan, and they still bloody talk to me about it. Anyway, he's a very valuable person. I think that he's incredibly valuable and talented, but he is just the archetype of what we're talking about. He's a comedian and he's into MMA and fighting. But he has one foot planted in the MMA world pretty much all the time throughout his content. But he just leaves the other foot kind of free to stomp around wherever he chooses. So it's got this grounding factor. It's got this common thread throughout everything. But then there's also this kind of variable with all of this content. You don't know where it's going to go. It always kind of lives back to MMA in a way, but there's always something else. Like he did Tom DeLonge. I think there's some talk about him doing Kanye West next.
Yeah.
Like this is literally the commentator from UFC is interviewing Kanye West. So if that doesn't kind of show you that there's, a hope to talk about music and then some, or music plus, or however you want to explain it, like then there's, that's just a shining beacon that's the way forward.
And I think, and this is probably going off on a slightly different tangent, but podcasting itself has an advantage because it's that long form content where people have got an opportunity to understand and listen to the context and roll with it. So you get the full story. Whereas sometimes a lot of that clickbait sort of headline stuff, people aren't even clicking on the actual.
Oh yeah, it's just rubbish.
They're just reading the headline and getting triggered or outraged because of it. But I guess going back to the writing side of it, have you ever been sort of conscious or apprehensive about the volume of content out there and the volume of noise that you've got to cut through? And so regardless of whether there's quality in the writing itself, just because we're in this world now where the content is just coming out at such a rapid, high volume, like rapid pace, that for you as a writer and an individual trying to get your own name out there, and you are in a more fortunate position these days, but for you, is this something that you're always conscious about, going, how can I cut through so much noise out there?
Sure, I'm a bit conscious of it, but I do feel as though I came in at a time when we didn't really need to worry about that because there were so few people doing it. And I worry that we're kind of gatekeepers now, and maybe the door is shut in a lot of ways for people coming up in the same way we did because of the amount of volume now, as you mentioned. But that said, that's like saying that no one will ever be famous on YouTube again. Or no one will be famous on Instagram again. I think it's more challenging now because of the amount of noise. But for me, I get a kick out of it because there's just so much. Like I'm kind of twisted in the head, but I love the challenge. I love the rivalry. I love seeing other people succeed at what they're doing, and then I don't want to. It's not this feeling of like, oh yeah, they've succeeded. Now I got to take them down. I love seeing these people succeed and then just being like, cool, now how am I going to do that? How am I going to get mine? And I enjoy the noise. I think it makes it for a healthy and vibrant kind of atmosphere. But at the same time, I kind of do think for these next wave, this next generation of voices, which are really crucial, and I think we're going to need them soon, I do worry about how they're going to cut through the noise. And it seems like, a lot of the noise comes from clickbait. That seems to be mainly the noise. It's this weird, I don't know, you touched on it before. I think it's cool that a lot of people are throwing politics into music because music and politics have always gone hand in hand.
That's right.
But I have seen a lot of people, find connections that just simply weren't there. A lot of so-and-so comments on Trump, and I have to sit back and I'd be like, why the fuck do you care what, some pop punk musician says about Donald Trump and all those kind of things. So I think the noise is a problem. But I also think the noise is going to start sorting itself out, and that's when this next generation will kind of rise. I think that we're at peak capacity now, surely, right? Like surely. And then
I think
sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think so. I think you're right, and I think like one thing, just from my own experiences of whether it be playing in a band or doing this podcast as well, you sort of look out there and you look at your peers, you look at the other people that are doing similar things to you, and at times, and I could certainly appreciate this would be the same for writing and journalism, where there's so many other people doing stuff out there, but maybe either not with the same depth or the same attention to detail or whatever it might be. And so, but they might be getting some immediate short-term attention, and you start to think like, where's the deserved attention meant to go? But I think a lot of this is that long tail. Like you've got to be in it for the long run. And a lot of these people that sort of fly in, create a whole bunch of noise and attention and become a distraction, usually fizzle out fairly quickly as well. And it's the people that have got, I guess, that long-term vision, are creating substance, creating quality of what they're doing, will have that sort of long-term benefit and status and reputation and all those sort of things that are deserved. It's just, and I think at the moment where we are at, I guess, just in society and with everybody sort of with their eyes wide open with the internet, because the internet's been around for a little while now, but I think as it stands now, people are they're just getting ambushed, because I think a lot of the mainstream media's come over to the internet, I should say. And so everybody's using social media and the platform and advertising and all sorts of stuff to just inundate us with content and information. And, businesses are being told to create content, valuable content as well. So there's so much noise there. And I think over time that will calm back down, and the true pieces of substance, that quality will rise to the top eventually. But I think it's just sort of battering down for the short term and sort of letting things do what they need to do, but still keep doing what you keep trucking.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that we're in a weird stage right now where no one really knows what the hell we're doing, what the hell's happening, because social media has just gotten to the point where I actually maintain, I don't want to get too off topic and too deep, but I think that we're going to kind of entering the first kind of post-internet, post-truth society where I think that's actually where we're headed with it all, because of this just mass influx of information. I read somewhere, I said a couple of weeks ago that back in the day that, an average person would read one newspaper worth of information. And now the average human these days gets something like 170 newspapers worth of information a day. And so that's kind of what I mean when we're at this post-truth thing where no one really cares about the quality or the truthness or how factual what they're reading is anymore, because they're just reading everything. But I think that whatever the effects of that will be, that's kind of, that's a discussion for another time. But I think we're at the tipping point with it. I think that now people are realizing, why am I even clicking on this article? Why am I reading this shit? That's going back a bit, when this clickbait thing started and all this noise started, the feeling that I would get, and, I've heard a lot of similar feedback, you click these, oh, this is dumb, I'll get a cheap laugh, and you find yourself clicking on some dumb thing and reading it, and you're like, huh, that's the only reaction. That's the only reaction anyone ever gives to these things. It's that little, huh, before you close the tab. That's the payoff. That's the return of interest. So then that over the years has turned into, now, I don't know if you're the same, but you click it and you have that thought of, why the fuck am I clicking this? Why am I doing this? This is going to be dumb. and then that's where we're kind of at now. The next stage is I'm not clicking. That's really the only logical next step in that kind of behavior, is we're all going to go, I'm not clicking. And I think we're going to start seeing that now. We're going to start seeing low traffic on all these websites, and people just not clicking. People kind of will get that fix through these. I've noticed a big increase in private Facebook groups. I think private Facebook groups are going to take the role of the clickbait websites, and that will clear the way for authentic writing and authentic journalism in all spheres, all industries, music, tech, whatever.
I think, you might have nailed it on the head there with, I guess, the approach mentally of looking at these sort of articles and these clickbait sort of, links that show up in news feeds, because years and years ago, when satire really sort of came to light, I mean, there's always been satire in our culture for hundreds of years, but especially sort of recently, things such as The Onion and a lot of other sort of media outlets, when they first started getting some traction, people couldn't understand the concept of satire, and they couldn't work out whether this was factual or not, and so a lot of people were spreading this information like it was the truth, and that was part of the joke. And now I think a lot of people understand that is what it is, and they've embraced it as in some ways it's a really sort of vital part of society, to be able to mock things and put a spin on it and put a different perspective on a topic, but doing it in that particular format. So the view on that particular thing has changed. And I think with clickbait, even for me, when I'm scrolling through a news feed, I very rarely click on anything now that sort of shows, like just the way that a headline's written now, I know what the intention is behind it. Like I can
Right.
I'm not getting tricked into it anymore because I'm reading it going.
But you used to, yeah? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Oh, no, not even tricked. Like, you're just like me, right? You wanted that cheap, sugary payoff, right? Like that, it's just going to be like eating a toffee apple. Like, I wasn't even tricked in the beginning. I knew that I was clicking on dumb things to get a dumb kick.
Well, I think even for me, like initially for some of them, I legitimately got tricked for a few of them. And then after
right.
And then after,
same, yeah.
And then after a while, I sort of, it got to that point where it was a laugh and you're getting a little bit of light entertainment from it. But very similar to what you said, you get to a point now where you read it, you know exactly what you're in for because you can see the intention behind why they've worded that headline the way that they have. You can tell that it's instigating something. And so you just think, I'm not, like, even if there was some substance to that article, you know that the intention's not authentic. So, like, it just gets to the point where there's no benefit to click on it whatsoever. And so
exactly, yeah.
I think the masses will eventually sort of catch up to that, or are getting to that point now where, as you said, that click-through rate is going to dramatically drop, and these organizations that are doing this tactic, which is just a marketing tactic, that's all it is, that they'll realize, like everything else in the past, that they've kicked it like a dead horse, and they're going to have to move on to something else. And whatever that next thing's going to be, and it'll forever be a new sort of thing to try and distract people or get people's attention. But this particular tactic will eventually phase itself out. But I don't think it'll be too far off.
No, I think it's happening now, and I think that people are starting to demand and crave substance. I think for the past, when did the Keeping Up with the Kardashians start? Whenever the first day of Keeping Up with the Kardashians, I think that mankind, as a whole, we started craving substance, whether or not we realized it, and started acting out in strange ways because we were needing something, but we weren't getting it. But I think now the people have realized that they want substance, they want meaning, they want a return of investment, or for taking the time to ingest something, which you don't really get with these kind of cheap payoff, crappy things, these toffee apple contents, I'll call it that. There's just no nutrition there, and we're starved for it now. We're completely famished because there's not really been much substance in the content. You can't. I know that there's been some great documentaries have been made, but really the bulk of the top 1% of content is that My Kitchen Rules. It's Married at First Sight. It's all those things which you just don't get anything back from. And I think now we're seeing the repercussions of that, where people are going, wow, I'm so hungry, give me something, give me, I need some nutrients, give it to me now. And so I think, I reckon you could put you could put an expiry date on clickbait now. You could mere months. I think it would be months before we start seeing a revolt.
And I think, you see it across all different mediums, and TV being one of them, where it'd be the numbers of people tuning into just normal free-to-air television, where for decades, generations have watched whatever's on the idiot box, and the 5 channels, the 3 channels, the 7 channels, whatever it was, and that was all of your content, just like the newspaper concept that you were saying before. And then suddenly we've got things like Netflix, we've got the internet, we can search for our own documentaries. I mean, for one of my game changers years and years ago was going to those free documentary websites, and suddenly I'm like, why the hell am I turning a TV on anymore?
I remember those sites, yeah.
Yeah, and I just suddenly you're exposed to so many different options, and you think, oh, that's interesting, and then you find something to watch. And so, but years and years ago, you would just be sort of, you'd be pushed into a particular sort of set of circumstances where you've only got limited resources to get any form of content whatsoever. And even when reality shows kicked off, people thought that it was a reality show, and everything that was happening in that show was completely authentic and genuine and exciting and all these sorts of things. And then people went into a spiraling depression because their life was nowhere near as exciting as what was being depicted on a reality show.
Sure.
And now people are wiser to it and understand that they aren't necessarily a reality show. They are fabricated to make it entertaining and create sets of circumstances and scenarios to entertain people. And so people are repulsed by that and now looking for more substance. So yeah, I think just in general, with a lot of that sort of cookie cutter media that's been put out there over the years, I think a lot of that will continue to sort of dilute and just disappear.
Yeah. I think the payoff is just getting cheaper and cheaper because you think back into when reality TV first started, like The Real World, like, 7 strangers, one house. Like, I remember that blowing my mind when I was a kid, and just being like, whoa, these are the coolest people in the world. Like, I will never be this cool. I will never be this rich, and then the Hills kind of came along, and I understand the Hills was just probably so cancerous and toxic for society that we're yet to really learn the true rot. But it was a similar kind of thing, just being like, wow, how do you do this? But now it's gotten to the point where you can actually do it really easy. You see that, the Kardashians, I keep nailing them. I don't think I'm being a bit unfair on them.
No, not at all.
They're, you can go out and buy everything they're wearing. They will release a budget line of all that stuff. You can be a Kardashian.
Yeah.
Like, you couldn't be one of the guys from the Real World or one of the girls from the Real World. That was impossible. But now you can actually be it. So now it's just this kind of, like, the cheapest payoff at all. It's just like this advertisement. Now it's just this advertisement for something you can actually be. And so I think, and kind of going back to your point about when you only had 3 channels, I think that that's hugely important to the content that was being created at the time. Trent Reznor said it recently, that part of the reason that he was so successful was because he was so bored all the time. And you get a lot of the creatives say the same thing. They found their voice, they found their content, what they wanted to create, purely from being bored. And I see that there's a lot of boredom these days, but there's so many distractions that no one's really accepting the fact they're bored.
Yeah, that's right. It's a different kind of boredom these days. Like,
yeah.
And I think, if anything, that term probably needs to be embraced in a far more positive sense, where people need to make the effort to be bored.
Yeah.
And I've been reading a few things recently about the word lazy, and the definition of it, or the interpretation of that word for many years, has always been sort of this negative thing. It's a lack of ambition or a lack of drive or whatever it might be. But sometimes I think laziness is actually a positive, because you're reducing the amount of input so that you can look at things from a wider scope and be able to make better decisions. And so it's sort of like changing the definitions of some of these words that we put a lot of negative stigma against. And I think people probably do need to be more bored to be able to stimulate or get inspired by different things around them.
Yeah, and I read something again recently. I can't remember where I read it or who said it, which is frustrating, but it wasn't me. We'll preface it with that. Where someone basically said, I think, 100 years ago, some philosopher said that the problem with mankind is that we don't know how to sit alone in a room. And that was going to be at the detriment of our survival. And now I think the opposite is true. I think that we are so good at sitting alone in a room. Like, we can nail that now. It's everything else that we can't do. And I think that, I actively am trying to figure out why things are happening. And I think that this is just a consequence of this wellness craze that has been affecting mankind for some time now, where, it's not enough to just be healthy anymore. It's not enough to just be happy. You have to be well. And I think that has added into this world of boredom and laziness, where, if you're bored, you can't be bored. You need to be better. Boredom is bad. And as you said, it's this really negative connotation. If you're bored, you're a boring person. Start watching a lifestyle series on TV or something along those lines. It's just, boredom is being seen as bad, when in fact I think history, and as you mentioned, boredom is a time of introspection. It's a time of thinking. It's a time of planning. And we're missing that. I think we need a bit more of those things than just action.
It's probably just more the acceptance of the complete spectrum of human habits and emotions, instead of just, segregating particular positive attributes and just focusing, on the surface positive attributes, and saying that is the best way to live, and really it's the only way that people should be living. And,
yeah, exactly.
And sort of like there's a guy, Chris Themelko, who's on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he plays in a band in Melbourne called Orpheus Omega, and he made a really good point around, I guess, just the mental health side of things, but that day that comes around each year, the Are You OK Day, and he said it's fantastic that that exists, but it's almost, there's an underlying tension, and I'm butchering exactly what he said, but the point that he was making was that not only do we need to check that people are okay, but we need to also make sure that people feel okay for not feeling okay. Like, it's completely fine to feel off and have a bad day, or be down in the dumps or upset or whatever it might be. There's nothing wrong with that, and people shouldn't feel guilty or horrible because of those feelings, because they're they're constructive feelings. Like, people need to feel the whole spectrum of emotions, because that's what being human's all about, and that's part of our development. But
Sure.
when we're told to be positive all the time and not show anything else, and any other emotion is this critically horrible thing to go through, and we need to push people out of it, then it just adds an extra layer of stress.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think that I have a very vibrant and exciting history with mental illness. And for me, those Are You Okay days, for me, it kind of compounded it, and it made things worse. I totally understand what the previous guest said and how they're a beautiful thing. But for me personally, because of that issue, because of this idea that it's not okay to not be okay, that comes with it, that kind of, the mnemonic meaning of Are You Okay Day, it's in between the lines, that fucked with me, because I started thinking, wait a second, like I sometimes feel better when I'm not okay, in a very twisted and convoluted way. I sometimes, that's my comfort zone, because that's kind of what I'm used to. And so I think that this war against normalcy, or this war against just fucking being human, is having this impact where people are thinking, oh shit, I can't be bored. And then they're just looking around like mad. What do I do? What do I do? And then bam, of course they go for something with a cheap payoff, because it's not okay to be bored. You got everyone walking around. Wait, are you bored? It's almost like there's boredom police, on Instagram. And it's like, are you bored? Wait a second, you can't be bored. Look at the world around you. Well, you're the problem. What's wrong with you if you're bored? And so I think that's got to stop. I went to this influencer breakfast, super trendy, in the eastern suburbs, and it was
Eastern as well.
Yeah, it was the most soulless thing I've ever experienced in my life. Yeah. And there was not a single person in this room willing to admit that we as humans experience an unlimited axiom of emotions, some of which haven't even been named, never will be. It's just no, that's not a thing. You have to be well. And then, it's kind of looking over, everyone's looking at the room. Are you not well? You don't look well. I'm well. Like, I don't know what well means, but I'm going to smile and nod because I'm well. And it's just, oh man, like I'm getting lost in that memory because it's so fucking horrible. But yes, back to the point that the way that we're expected now to be interesting, to be well, to be, interested and interesting. It's just, it's cutting the legs out of creation. It's making everyone boring without being bored. And that's the problem.
Well, I mean, if you look at all, like, just from a music point of view alone, but especially, literature and just all of creativity for hundreds of years, that's all come out of adversity. It's come out of bad experiences. It's come out of really raw emotions, and it's inspired people to put themselves out there and channel that energy into a way that's creative, that's shared with other people. And that's an amazing thing, and that's why people identify with it and get so much out of it, is that there's a sharing of emotion. And if everyone's forcing themselves and fabricating their emotions to feel complete joy and happiness and positivity all the time, then yes, it's stifling that creativity. It makes everything bland, but it also just raises the stress levels and the tension.
Oh God, yeah.
It's just so much easier for things to break, and when things break, then all hell breaks loose. But I mean, one thing really quickly, and I'll steer it a little bit back to writing, because one thing, like, I don't write, and I say that in a way to make myself, or to tell myself that I'm not a writer, because everybody loves to use that term. But I've when I do the podcast, I do show notes and I write a little blurb, and I've got another one that I do a couple little blog posts and things like that. But for me, writing is really hard. But it's one of those things where I think I've started to embrace the ups and the downs along the way. And I understand that you can't always be inspired or stimulated or happy in order to push through and push through that creativity. So I guess what I'm not explaining this probably the best way, but from a writing point of view, how do you get through those tougher times from a writing point of view? Because you've got to sit down, you've got to be immersed in what you're doing, but do you push through in those times when you're off, your head might not be completely there?
Yeah, and I think I like to think I'm a pretty good example of this whole spectrum of this mood, because when I started, I was the worst. I was like, some of the shit I'd write. Like I vividly remember getting an email from a very well respected publicist who's a good friend of mine now, but wasn't at the time. and she just responded to this interview I'd posted, and the only thing she said was, "Mike, put down the bong." And it was just like, it was, the typos were there. It was just bad. And I was really lazy. And I would do this thing where I would, just sit and stew in the stress rather than actually do anything about it. I'd sit and complain. I don't know whether I was getting like a kick out of complaining to my friends, like, oh, I've got all these big band interviews I'm sitting on, I'm not doing them. I don't know why I was doing it, but I was just really becoming a complete victim to things like stress and to things like expectations and to just the what ifs of what if this was a shit interview and I begin transcribing it and I hate it and it sucks. So I would just not do them, and I'd be weeks late for deadlines. My God, I remember once having to, this sucks, but I think the statute of limitations is gone on this one. I remember once having to lie to a bunch of different clients that my laptop got wiped because I just got to the point where all these interviews were so late that they were useless. No one was going to pay me for them. And I had to just be like, oh yeah, my computer broke. I don't have it. Sorry. And I don't feel good about that. And I think that I massively owe the universe and the industry for that time in my life, and I'll never act like that again. But then I started realizing that things like inspiration, things like motivation are all bullshit. They're not there. They're fleeting. They're things that, it's like anxiety. Those things are it's like a feeling that doesn't come with logic. There's no reason to it. There's just random electrons firing in your brain. But what I found was real was discipline. And once you start having that discipline, once you start just being like, no, I'm professional, I need to allocate time in my day where I'm doing this, and I do not get up during that day. And during that time, sorry, I don't just go to the shops. I don't just dick around. I am disciplined, and discipline does not come and go. Discipline stays once you've got it. So that's kind of how I ended up troubleshooting the pitfalls of not having a boss and not having that whip cracking or that axe swinging above you. Is just being like, no, I need to be disciplined. Otherwise I'm not going to be able to do this. And so, it took many years, but now I'm at the point where, I've got two calendars. I've got the one on my Google Calendar, and I've got my physical calendar that I actually write things on and then replicate across both calendars so that I can't miss it. I can't escape it. And that was just one of the many little disciplinary things I put into my life to make sure that I wouldn't be the victim of inspiration or motivation again.
It's such, I've heard other people say that as well, but it's easy to forget it because, and it goes back to what we were saying before about the way that human behavior is portrayed out there now, where it's this positivity, the motivation, inspiration, things like that. And they're great words and they're great things in particular doses, but the reality behind it, I've heard a few people talk about discipline and position it in that way because, and I have to remind myself as well, discipline will breed everything else. Like everything else comes after the fact. You've got to have that structure in place to increase it's sort of like the term luck, and people go, oh, you're so lucky. But luck comes from hard work and then opportunity coming off that. And so it's a really difficult thing. And I think people that the freelance sort of lifestyle, and the people that have been really successful in freelancing have, been able to cultivate those behaviors and the discipline, whereas people that may have been working in a traditional job capacity for so many years, discipline's not quite there because discipline's created by the people that you're working for. So you don't have to think as much. And really the discipline is really just rocking up for the most part. Everything else is structured, it's told, it's presented to you. You then follow the instructions of whatever it's been told to do, and somebody else is ultimately accountable for you. And you're not really accountable for yourself. And I think when you move away and you start, creating your own business or you're freelance or anything like that, that there is nobody else. It's all you. So that discipline is so important, but I don't think that gets talked about enough.
Yeah, and it's not. If I can do it, then I have to say that anyone can become disciplined. I was a loose fucking unit. I was just unprofessional, multiple drug addictions. Just like an all-around mess. And then I realized that, and it's like I didn't do it to sort out anything else in my life. Despite the fact that at that time everything in my life needed sorting out, not just my writing, but because I decided to be disciplined in my writing and in my freelance work, by accident, the rest of my life started to kind of come together. And I was pleasantly surprised at that. I was not expecting it at all. But I think that anyone that is worried about not having the discipline, I just like, oh God, talk to me about that, because if I can do it, anyone can.
with you talking about the calendars and sort of cross-referencing everything and sort of mapping it out, and that's sort of your structure and your discipline. Do you, because you're doing so many different things, are you allocating particular things for particular days, or things work better in the mornings for you or in the afternoons? Is there some form of I'm trying to think of a better word, but is there some form of routine that you put in place for yourself that gives you that discipline to push to create that momentum?
Yeah, so I used to do the kind of, I think the standard thing is like days of the week. Like a lot of my freelance friends will be like, oh, from Monday through Wednesday, I'm with this client, the rest of the week with this client, or something similar. And I used to do that as well, but I find it's just doesn't, the workflow doesn't work that way. It's not as forgiving as being like, oh, all these other clients are going to not talk to me during Monday to Wednesday.
Yeah.
Then kind of the nature of this business is that you're kind of constantly getting hit up and you don't really know when that's going to happen. So what I started doing is I actually stole the idea from my tattoo buddy, and I started divvying up my day in a similar way to how a tattoo artist does. So instead of having, Monday to Wednesday I work on this job, I kind of broke it up. So I'm just like, okay, so, between 9 to 1, I'm going to be doing this. And then I'm going to have an hour break. And then from 2 to 5, I'm going to be doing this. Then I'm going to have another hour break. This might shock some of the 9 to 5ers, but we don't, unfortunately, freelancers can't just stop at 5. So, then I normally have a longer break in the evening. And then because I'm a bit of a night owl, so once it gets to like 8 o'clock, I'll put in a few more hours. So in a similar sense to how my tattoo buddy sells a few hours for sessions of the day, that's kind of how I started breaking it up. And I noticed the clients were responding to that as well. I'd say to them, oh, so I'm yours. I wouldn't say it like this, but basically like I'm yours from this time to this time. Use me as you will. And I found that they would be really communicative and team players during that time. And I wouldn't get so many random emails from them during the week about, oh shit, can we make this change? They knew that they had this allocated time. Perhaps, I'm not sure why, perhaps for them it was easier to visualize the hours and the minutes ticking away than actual days. So they knew, oh, okay, we've only got him for a few hours, let's make this work. So that's kind of how I broke it up. And, I'm quite fortunate in the position where I can charge for the hour, or for, or I think of that when I give them a quote and how many hours I'm going to put into it. So that works for me. I think that it could also work for someone who was just starting out as well, who maybe wouldn't have as much leveraging power. I think that breaking their day up into those hours is a much better way to do it than breaking your week up into jobs like that.
Definitely from a perception point of view, if you're saying that you're only limited to particular days, I think most of us all know that, nobody's sitting at a desk for 3 days straight and not doing anything else. Like you do sleep in that time, you do go off and do other things, and no doubt you'll have other commitments. And so I think what you said before, that perception of the value around that time changes when it's hourly, or it's in several hours in a block consecutively, where it's very likely that person is completely focused and dedicated and not doing anything else or not balancing anything else, because they've allocated that time specifically for you instead of this general, broad, vague space
Monday.
of time.
Yeah. Totally. And for you, it helps you visualize it. You can feel it. You're seeing the sun moving over, so oh shit, the day's going. I better get from my perspective. It's the day's going. I better get going. I better make this great. Let's get this happening. There's 15 minutes left, and I'm also fortunate in the sense that I've been doing this for a while now, that I know how long I take to do things. I'm by no means quick, but I know that if I need to transcribe, edit, and publish a 20-minute phone interview, it's probably going to take me an hour and 15 minutes on average. So then I can work that into it. And a press release that I might write for something's probably going to take me an hour. And I know these things now because I know myself and how I work in this situation. I probably not a good rate. I'm sure that people can do a press release in less than an hour. I'd fucking love to meet them, but I'm sure that they can do it. But that was another bonus. So working out how you work. I think that a lot of people talk about, I write better in the morning or I write better at nighttime. I'm not too sure what you think about that, but I think that might fall into the discipline thing. And, my attitude is you'll damn well write whenever you're told to. But so I think that, the breaking it down into just keeping that schedule, like periods at school. We all have that kind of in our DNA from doing 12 years of school.
Yeah. And I think also yeah, people that might use those examples of, I work better at night or in the morning and things like that are probably more, well, I mean, it literally is. They're more reliant on their environment rather than their own capability and their own discipline to be able to produce anything or to be productive. And I mean, I do a similar thing, especially when I've got a day where I've got a heap of things that I need to do and I've been procrastinating and have been putting it off or been distracted by something else. And I will do blocks of time. And it does a couple of things. It definitely does what you've mentioned as far as understanding that period of time, and there's no negotiation around it. But I think also it gives you the peace of mind that this is not a never-ending task. Like, that by midday, this task or whatever I'm working on needs to end because the next thing's going to start at whatever time. And so it sort of it takes the stress off a little bit because it just knows, that you're not having to do the same thing for a long, never-ending period of time. It's sort of, there's a start and there's an end to it. And even in some cases where, worst case scenario, you don't actually complete the task, that you can put it to the side, get onto the next thing, and then or allocate extra time to do it later on. But it sort of just takes that pressure off to know that, it's sort of like that bite-sized chunk approach as well.
Exactly. Yeah. That's something I really appreciate too, as well. The only way to eat an elephant, and so, but for me, another thing that I can add to that is that the structures, the discipline of that and the visualization of breaking it into hours is good. But also the big kicker for me was the implementation of breaks and, structured breaks in my schedule that were just as important as doing the work. And that was that was the result of finding out the hard way what happens when you don't put the breaks in, and having a complete system meltdown. And basically, everything, my brain, my body just began to shut down from stress. I realized that stress is a cancer, and once it starts to grow, it spreads, and you can become very fucking sick, and you can almost die from this shit. So for me, it was this implementation of breaks, this reward, this carrot and stick, whatever you want to call it. That's when things really started to change for me, when I would stand up, I wish I could say leave my phone, but I don't. I go for from the midday break. It's from 12, it's from 1 to 2 usually. I go for a walk. Like, I just get up. I get excited for it now. I'm like, fuck yeah, here comes that break. And I get up, put the headphones in, throw on some podcast, and just go for a walk for an hour. Do not think about work. Do not reply to emails. And that changed everything for me. Having having that hour scheduled is just as important as having the 3 hours of writing scheduled for me. And I think for everyone, and I think if anyone's saying, oh, no, I don't need that, then you are going to fucking go through what I went through last year, and it's going to be hell. So I would just recommend to everyone to get used to having a break now. It's just get disciplined at having a break.
It's obviously like a bit of a reward system that's in place, but I think to be able to allow yourself to not have any expectations in that period of time, and for whatever, like, some people may need a longer period of time or shorter or whatever works for the individual. But I think when people are in a period of time where there is no obligation for anything, you don't have to do anything. There's no tasks, there's no conversations that you have to have. If you want to do something, it's completely up to you, but there's no obligation. And when people sort of really understand that, and there's an element of freedom in that allocated piece of time, that you come back to whatever you're doing as far as that next task with a little bit of, you re-energize. It's a bit more, there's an element of freshness to it, where you're not sort of on the verge of burning out or having a high level of stress, as you mentioned before.
Sure, yeah. And like I was one of those people that would be like, everyone was telling me around me to slow down and to have breaks. And I'm one of those people that's like, fuck that. How much can you really relax in an hour? But now I'm just the other side of that. I'm just like, forget the hour, 15 minutes, try it and then come back and tell me what you reckon. And it's like, it's just that idea that you can get. One of my biggest problems was that I would attribute my worth to my success or to the success of my latest output, which is even more damaging. So for me to find an hour where there was no schematic, there was no metric for success, there was no way that I could there was nothing I'm going to get out of it. I'm not going to make any money for this hour. It was a big hurdle for me to get over that I had to do that. It sounds silly, but it really was for me just to be like, wait. So I'm going to sacrifice an hour? Like I could be making money off that. I could just keep burning, but no, like now I see the light. I understand the work-life balance thing that everyone's been going on about. Not wellness, that's bullshit, but work-life balance is imperative to surviving as a freelancer.
And it's probably easier to embrace those breaks and pauses when your discipline's up to speed. Like when you've got good discipline, you know that when you are on and when you are working, that you are making the most of those allocated periods of time because you've got that discipline. You are showing up each time and getting the work done. So then
Sure.
I think a lot of that is that people can't stop because there's this underlying feeling of guilt because they probably haven't been as disciplined as they should. I certainly am a victim to this quite often where, I might sit back, and be not doing anything and trying to relax. And I'm like, I feel so guilty for doing it because I realize that I've stuffed up previously and haven't been as disciplined as I should. And there's stuff that should have been done earlier and hasn't. And so it's stopping me from actually slowing down, pausing, relaxing, and trying to re-energize because I haven't done the right thing in the first place. So that discipline sort of, it marries up quite well with these breaks as well because they complement each other.
Exactly. And I wish I could describe myself as this just hardened motherfucker that, doesn't feel what you were just explaining, but that just, several times a week, I'll either fuck something up, or I'll get a edit from someone will send back some edits, which is just completely bullshit. Or, a client will completely change a brief on something. So you're always kind of on some sort of shifting ground, and there's always a potential for anything to go wrong, which will really impact that break. You won't be thinking, you try not to think about work, but you're listening to this podcast, but you're missing it all because you're stuck in samsara in your head, just being like, why? But to fight that, I just thought, no, like this break is happening. These two breaks in my day are happening, whether I like it or not. They're just as important as the writing. I better make sure that I do something in that writing period to make sure that I get the most out of that break. Otherwise, it's going to be a shit writing period and a shit break, and the rest of the day is going to suck. So I kind of level it to myself like that. So even if something bad happens, even if I wrote a terrible piece, even if I needed to finish some missions on Red Dead Redemption, I just make sure that I do something that to get to in the writing time to make that break worth it. Whether that's, just starting from scratch again or doing it again or finding a related piece of content, a primary or a secondary source that you can read and research to help strengthen your corner for what you're about to write. Just anything, just do something like that to kind of to earn yourself that break.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on it briefly before, but I think it's worth just going back to it quickly as well. The Neversphere.
Yeah.
And I remember you messaging me a little while back and you were talking about it, and I had a bit of a skim there and then had a look at the last couple of days as well. And you've actually acknowledged it I think it's on the website, and where you said, these things that you talk about don't seem on the surface to relate to each other. So you've got categories of music, gaming, and MMA. And so when you look at it, you sort of think, oh yeah, well, it's a bit of an eclectic mix. But the way that that you guys have put it out there is that it all intertwines together. There's a relationship between them all. And and correct me if I'm wrong, is it sort of, you mentioned that this was sort of inspired to create content that's a bit more broader and covers a lot more different topics, but is it sort of more to depict particular type of lifestyle, or is it more like it sounds so dirty when you say the word lifestyle? Like, is it a lifestyle medium that you're creating?
It was essentially, by mistake, because the way it started was that my mate that I did it with, we've kind of not done anything for a few months now. We're going to be going loud again, I think, at the start of this year. But we needed a bit of a break from that. Because I also did some other freelance work over the past 6 months, which really did take me away from it. But damn it, I miss my baby. I can't wait to get back. But basically what happened was my best mate is obsessed with MMA. I'm obsessed with music, and we meet in the middle on gaming. And so we thought, well, let's just, we're really unhappy with the content that was being produced within those worlds. Seemed as though outsiders were talking about the things that we loved the most. And in these kind of nerd communities, people were saying the same things. Like, who is this non-MMA person talking about an MMA event? They don't even know what they're talking about. So the whole idea of the Neversphere was to make content, for us, by us kind of thing. For nerds, by nerds. And, we'll speak as colloquial as we want. We'll use in-group language, and we'll make sure that this is a safe space for completist nerds. And so that's kind of, then we started noticing that there's you can't really talk to a musician about their life, their ups and downs, without them talking about their hobbies, which usually includes MMA or gaming. It was just so intertwined. We found all these topics which are so intertwined, even to the point where there's MMA video games which use bands' music. And there's artists that do MMA and fucking Chris Jericho, wrestlers that do bands. It just, the whole thing just started cross-contaminating itself. And then we realized that, this could be a ton of fun. I think going forward, we're going to probably stick with those ones. I don't know how we're going to do content, but we organized a meeting, me and my mate, meeting on the 1st of Feb to discuss what we're going to do with the Neversphere. So it's not gone quiet, but we're going to pivot, we're going to reposition, and we're going to see how we can have some fun again this year.
Well, I guess the good thing is that it becomes, even if it's not for a wider audience, which is obviously the intention, that a lot of people are going to be attracted to the content, the style of writing, the topics intertwining together. But for the two of you to be able to have an outlet that you can freely express and articulate things that you both give a shit about and you really care about, but not be restricted to a particular pitch or a topic that you've got to stick to. You can blend it in with other worlds, and you've got a platform that you can do it. It's sort of like, and this is probably a horrible comparison, but it's sort of like someone with their own social media page that gets to talk about whatever they love.
Exactly, yeah.
But you guys have got this platform which can be a media outlet for a lot of other people that are like-minded, that love maybe one of the three, or all three, or two out of the three, and maybe gets exposed to one of the other topics out of that cross-pollination of everything being sort of intertwined together.
Exactly. And I know maybe some fans of Dragon Force will read our interview with Herman Lee, who talks about his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu training, and then think, wow, the way that he describes that really ties up with my sensibilities. I'm going to try it. And we've heard similar feedback, whether or not people have actually done it, or they just kind of said that that's, I'm now an MMA fan because of this Dragon Force interview. I truly believe it, damn it, that people are kind of, that's the way for people to find new interests. It's never from just sticking to the one, your echo chamber of what you like. It's always, from just peeking over the fence a little bit and just being like, what's going on over there? It's like when you're listening to an album, I always start with my favorite song and I just burn the shit out of it. I play that thing 11 hours a day. And then what ends up happening is eventually the next track starts playing. And I'm like, you get busy and you can't run back to change it to the other one soon enough. And before you know it, you kind of like that second track that's been playing. And so that's the kind of thing that we wanted to do with that. Maybe you click on the MMA thing once and you're like, oh, that's all right. But then you go back and you're on the music thing. Oh, wait, what's on the MMA thing now? And eventually people just start spending more time on the MMA one or the gaming one. And, now I really want to, we've got, it worked, I have to say it worked. And a lot of the industry figured that out. We would get interview pitches from publicists who would attach social media marketing figures to show that listeners of this band also buy video games. They'd send me that data. And I was just like, holy shit, you guys are, these publicists, they're really starting to think outside the box now. So I think that the idea of not everyone said pick one, just pick one thing. You're doing too much, just pick one thing. But I now see that it really is, the variety is the spice of life, and the readers want that.
I mean, this is something that's been plaguing my mind for the last several months. Like, for us as a band, we play a certain style of music, and we think we're pretty varied. But I guess from a pigeonholed genre point of view, we're quite niched. But it's that whole changing of the industry, just talking about music solely for a moment, and having to think outside the box and go, you can't just approach things the way that we used to approach things years gone by, even 6 months ago. Like, things are changing so quickly. And I think, you know, there are a number of great examples out there of artists and bands that are showing up in these other worlds and having presence, as you said before, like, you know, games themselves featuring artists, featuring music, or even things like Twitch platforms where gamers are playing bands in the background, and that's providing cross promotion for an artist. And MMA, sort of the same thing in wrestling, where you've got, you know, intro music, all those. I mean, I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but UK MMA fighter Josh, I can't remember, but he loves Bolt Thrower, and he's got a Spotify playlist which is like the ultimate metal playlist, which has got a couple hundred songs on there, and it's just all amazing metal songs. But for those artists, that's gold, because this guy's got a lot of attention, a lot of exposure in his own world. But suddenly there's cross pollination, and even musicians, as you mentioned, some musicians have got a real fascination with gaming and MMA, and so they start talking about it, which helps those worlds. So I think for us, like for me now, like we're about to put out an album this year, and we're looking at it going, what do we do? What do we do outside the box? And so do we start to look down the path of, you know, are there people in the gaming world that might be able to help, or we can provide them with something that might stimulate them, and there might be something we can do, you know, on each side of the fence. And same with maybe even MMA. Like, is there something that we've got that might be really valuable for them, and vice versa? So it's
sure. And
there's so many different options, but it really means thinking outside the box. And I think even from what you've done, what you've both done by creating this site, and regardless of what happens into the future, and whether you have a bit of a pivot, or you add onto it, or you modify it, or anything like that, this is sort of an example of the possibilities of just not being pigeonholed into one little niche.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think we're by no means smashing with hits and all that kind of stuff, but all you have to do is just flick through some of the artists that we've had access to, and it really does speak for itself. Like Tech Nine, you know, I still have to pinch myself every now and then. How the fuck did we convince someone to let us have Tech Nine? and then the interview actually went, because we talked about gaming and we talked about MMA, Tech Nine ended up sharing it from his website, and so he had like a permalink on his website to this thing, and like, you know, we had to get our web developer guy to fix our fucking website so that we could handle that traffic. We weren't expecting that. And also, just kind of more to the point, is there are also communities which, you know, this might sound a bit dirty, but it's important. They're communities which are really comfortable at spending money on things they like, and there's everything is inelastic in these worlds. You know, oh man, like I'm embarrassed about how much I've spent on, like, not just comic books, but like comic book figurines that are still in their packet. Like, what the fuck is wrong with me? You can't even touch that. But I buy vinyl. I subscribe to streaming platforms. I'm a perfect example of a standard fan of these things. I'm more than happy to spend whatever it costs to get the thing I want. And, you know, and whether that means that the cat and I have to share a tin of tuna for the week, I don't give a fuck. You know, like, I want that limited edition record. I want that limited edition game. I want those kind of things. And that's how the community thinks. So to get all those kind of minds, there's people that are, you know, and that's not across the board. That's not everyone. There's so many communities which just don't want to spend money on shit. And they're stingy, and they'll really happily go for the cheaper options. I think a lot of the beauty and fashion world operate in that way, where they don't need the top tier one if they can get the same kind of thing for way cheaper. Like, that doesn't exist in our world. You'll get called out. You know, like, I got this Wolverine figurine on display in my place because it costs a lot of money. You know, like, I'll be ruined if someone comes in and they're like, wait a second, isn't this the cheap knockoff that they sold at this other thing? But forget about it, man. I can't leave the house for a month if that were to happen. And so that's, whether that's toxic, whether that's healthy, I don't give a fuck. It's fun. It's a fun world to be part of. And so that was another thing that we wanted to kind of keep these people together. You know, oh, you spend money, oh, you're cool to spend $150 on an MMA ticket. Maybe you're down to spend $20 on a CD. And so that was kind of our reasoning. We never really got the numbers back on that, but that was also part of it. So I think that, as you mentioned, it makes perfect sense for a band to approach these communities, MMA and gaming. I think another one would be like it's a bit of a reach, but like the car community, they fucking love spending money on shit. So I think that those kind of communities are the ones that the bands should cross-pollinate with, the fighters and streamers should cross-pollinate with, because we're all looking to spend money on something we like. And, you know, I'm talking about spending money a lot. It's trying to sound like a fucking dirty snake oil salesman. But really, it's a big factor, and I think that makes perfect sense. And you'd want to reach out to these communities and look for options. We worked with a not anymore because I don't even know if they're around. They weren't terribly nice to us, but an Australian fighting promotion called Brace. And they would kind of give us access to their events, and we would chop up the videos and make a supercut. And then we'd just go and find some local band. I think we did it with this one band called Life Pilot. I'm not too sure if they're around anymore, but we just hit them up and we were like, you guys kind of have that kind of authentic new metal kind of vibe that would go with these videos. Can we use your song on it? We don't have any fucking money, so please tell us to fuck off if we can't. And then, of course, this band was like, yeah, go for it. And as an aside, I found that most bands are cool with you not paying them if you just are polite and ask them. But at the same time, pay bands. Fucking pay bands. Like, you need to pay bands. So anyway, back to the point. And so then we put this video up. That band shared it. They're like, check it out. People getting knocked out to our song. And they had a blast. And I think that there would be a lot of bands that would love to do that. I'm not sure how you guys would feel. I'm sure you'd probably get a buzz out of some highlight knockout reel from a huge MMA event with your song to it. That'd be sick. And
man, I've got the song of this next album. It's in my head. I'm like, oh man, I think we might have to have a quick chat afterwards.
Dude, we could do it, man. We don't have any money though, so
no. We, I think for us, I mean, one of the good things about us as a band is that we can always create wealth indirectly off the back of opportunity. So for us, you can look for, if there's an opportunity to make money off something that's very transactional and upfront and very obvious, then that's fine. But I mean, most of that wealth and that value comes indirectly off the back of things such as opportunity, exposure, et cetera. And I know that can look really dirty sometimes when people talk about, well, you should be appreciative of the exposure only. It's a balance, and for us, when you get an opportunity to be able to show some presence in a world that maybe you haven't had any exposure in whatsoever, that stuff's unmeasurable. It's just
you can always take that to the bank, and I am an advocate for paying artists. I think it's just fucking very, very important. But yeah, at the same time, I find there's exposure and then there's exposure. And when I work with a band on some of this content, I'm very careful about using their stuff without paying them. I let them know that at any moment throughout the process, they can tell me to go fuck myself, and it's fine. It won't end up as a screenshot in some snarky Facebook post. I understand that you are in the position of power and I am being a choosy beggar. But then I find that, some sites will just, and I've seen it turn to shit before when they pay an exposure. I remember when I was kind of just came in when that was still sort of not a disgusting thing to say. And then they just kind of get their song added to a video. Then it would no mention of the band, no mention of anything, nothing. That's your exposure. But then what I try to do is if they give me their song, then like I'm going to put $100 into that Facebook post. I'm going to make sure that this is a minimum, I'll say, let's get 5,000 views on this so that, that's stuff ticking over on your end. Let's boost the post, sponsor the post it in Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, get it everywhere. And then and I'll make sure that your name, your artist name is everywhere. How do you want it formatted? You tell me. So that's the kind of exposure that I think you can eventually, as you said, indirectly take to the bank. Not immediately, because usually you've got to wait for for it to fully burn. But yeah, there's benefits to that.
Well, I think the big thing that the big point about all of this is that communication aspect. And I think where things have gone pear-shaped and gone ugly is when there's been an assumption made from either party and there's not actually a clear level of communication with intention. So the person that's requesting content or something from an artist makes the assumption that they don't have to do anything or explain anything because that's just the reality of what they think or their perception of being an artist is. The artist is expecting something but is not articulating it either because they've got an assumption of their value and what that other person's intentions are. And then what you find is that the intentions on both sides of the fence are not on the same page, and then things go really, really ugly really quickly. So I think there's nothing wrong with, from an artist point of view, supplying something without any immediate sort of monetary transaction. It's just a case that both parties are in agreement and on the same page and are communicating to understand, look, these are the circumstances, this is what potentially could be done, and these are the limitations, these are all the things that we've got to factor in. Are we both happy with it, yes or no? If not, cool, we'll move on. If we are, let's go for it.
Yeah, and I think that there's still some people out there that feel they can do the dodgy, as we're looking now with Clive Palmer and Twisted Sister. So there's still, the dude was like, he changed the words. Like, I don't know, I can't fucking heard it, but it's like, okay, you changed the words. What about the melody? What about the likeness? What about the attitude? What about the iconic fucking drum beat that you still used in it? Like, he just straight up assumed that all he needed to do was change a vocal line before this art belonged to him. And D. Snider's just going to destroy him. God, D. Snider's going to destroy him.
All I can say is that, yes, that definitely, and it is probably the best timing because he's coming out to tour at the beginning of February as well. So there'll be indirect promotion for his upcoming tour. So Doug from Hardline, who's bringing him out, will no doubt be trying his best to milk some of the upcoming days and weeks.
Yeah, good on him.
Which will then bring people out of the woodwork. I mean, even my dad texted me last night and said, have you seen that Twisted Sister are after Clive Palmer? And I said, oh, yeah, it's D. Snider, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wow, okay, now there's attention, and you can't pay for that. So yes, it's not a good situation, and Clive Palmer's a dick, and none of that stuff should have happened. But it's sort of like looking at a situation and trying to find an opportunity out of that situation. So I think there will be some benefit that will come out of all of this, particularly from D. Snider's camp.
Yeah, imagine how great it would be if Twisted Sister or D. Snider could sell out at the Australian tour in 2019. Like, that's the kind of world I want to live in. And if that's the outcome, then fuck yeah. I hope that more politicians try to rip off artists just before they get here so that we can ruin that politician's profile while boosting the profile of one of these forefathers of hard rock. Like, I'm so down with it. I love it. This is a delicious moment.
Exciting times.
Exactly. Yeah, man, I'm a petty man in many ways, but I am what I am.
Oh man. Well, I'm going to wrap it up now. I think we should definitely catch up in person sometime down the track and chat
totally, man.
Chat more about music and writing, because there's a whole bunch of stuff here that I didn't even touch on. I kept writing down all these things I was finding online, and I know it's definitely you. It's not your uncle, but it was. You are a jack of all trades. You've got a million different things on the go, and that's exciting. And I think that's something that, at least from my end, when I look at somebody like you that has created their own discipline, their work ethic, they've got a reputation, they've got a name. I've seen that you've been doing recently been doing some articles for Download, which is super cool.
Yeah, that's been a lot of fun. They were a really interesting example of them. They came in and they were like, oh, let's make it like real socially conscious stuff, real political.
Yeah.
Then I kind of wrote this thing which was just like way too fucking hectic about this, and then they kind of came back and they were like, yeah, look, we can't do this anymore. Can we just make it about the music? But like, it's been a lot of fun.
But it's something where they're examples of you as an individual having that leverage that we've referred to a bit, where people are coming to you because there's a particular standard or quality or style that you articulate that is valuable to other people. So I think from my perspective and doing a whole bunch of different things, it's exciting to see that, because you start to then compare in a good way, where you start to think, well, what can I do, or what am I doing, and how can I sort of do my own version of that in my own world. And I think when you see examples of people that are making it happen, raw and both beautiful and ugly at the same time, because that's the reality of life. And I'm trying not to use that word, but it is inspiring, but it's more just exciting, and it just shows the possibilities that are out there. So it's really cool, man. And I think there's a lot more to talk about. I'm going to let you go, and
Sweet.
Yeah, we'll catch up sometime over the coming months. But really exciting to see what you're doing. I'm going to link to the Neversphere so people can just see what's on there, the existing stuff, and obviously stay tuned into the year to see what happens with that, and then obviously to all of your writing and LinkedIn and all that sort of stuff. So people can get a bit more of a taste of what you're all about and what some of your content's been as well.
That'd be amazing. Thank you so much.
If you want to reach out to Mike, you can go to the Neversphere's website, which is nvrsphr.com.au. You can also follow Mike on Twitter and Instagram by searching Mike Hohnen Live, all one word. I'll have everything, all his social handles, everything in the show notes over at andysocial.net, so you can go and check that out. And as I said before, you can click through on your podcast player. Hopefully there'll be clickable links there as well, so nice and easy for everybody to check out. But thank you so much, Mike. Really, really appreciated it. few updates before we wrap this episode up. From a Lord perspective, we are shooting songs left, right, and center to different people, shopping for some opportunities and get some people on board to help push this album when it is going to be announced and released. So lots of stuff happening behind the scenes. As mentioned in previous episodes, we're still testing out final mixes as well. Tim is working on the first video clip. So that was filmed a while back, but there's a lot of work that's being put into this. So anybody that's been following Tim or the band or me on Instagram in particular, you may have seen a few teasers being sort of regrammed. Regrammed is like the repost sort of thing, or posted on all of our accounts. So check that out. Follow us on all those Instagram links, and you might see a few teasers of what is in store. But we're really excited. We're getting to a point where we're sort of bursting at the seams, wanting to share this music with everybody. So you will find that there'll be little teasers popping up in various places on the internet. So make sure you're following us on all the socials. Greatly appreciated. Self-starter point of view, where I'm starting to, and I think this is really sort of comes into theme with the conversation I've just had with Mike. I'm really starting to put together some structure and discipline around all these blog posts that I've got to write out for the first half of 2019. There are so many blog posts that I've got to catch up on that are offshoots of previous episodes of the podcast. So there is a lot of writing to do, and it's one of my well, I shouldn't say weak points, but it's not a strength of mine, and it's something that I like the idea of getting better at, but it's a very, very hard thing for me to do, is just to sit down and just purely focus on one particular thing. And writing's just one of those, it's not an easy thing to do, and I have a lot of respect for people that do it as a full-time gig and are very talented at it, and it's something that I don't do as a full-time gig, and I'm certainly not talented at it. So it's good practice for me, because I do want to get better at it, and it's a nice challenge for me to have, because there's a lot of blog content that I have there, but I've actually just got to write it out and publish it. So putting together a structure, getting some discipline in place, new year, new me, all that sort of stuff. And I'm continuing to record episodes for season 2 in advance. So by the time season 2 kicks off in June of 2019, this year, I will have the entire season 2 recorded in advance. That's what I'm hoping anyway. So if you've got any ideas of guests, please let me know, and I'll be more than happy to consider them for the podcast. And that's another episode in the bag. We are done for another week. Actually, before I wrap it up, I've got a question, and I'm going to put it out there. I don't know how many people listen to the end of these episodes and listen to me waffle on. Props if you do. But I'm going to put a question out there, see who's listening. But I'm going to New York in February or the tail end of February for, I don't know, about 10 days or so with Jess. And purely for holiday. But I'm thinking, why not take advantage of it and maybe do a few podcast episodes while I'm over there? So the question is, who do you think, that sounds really weird, who do you think I should get on the podcast? Who do you know, or who do you know of that's based in New York? And I know there's a lot of celebrities and things like that, and that's fine. I can aim high, but I don't know. Do you know anybody over there? Any Aussies that are working in New York that are doing great things? Do you know any musos? Any cool stories or people that are doing great things that are based in New York? I have contacted a few people. A few people that are particularly a little bit lofty, but it's good to throw your hat in the ring and see what comes of it. I'm not really pushing too hard. If I don't get anything done in New York while I'm there, then that's fine. But I do love the idea of making the most of these trips when I go abroad, because I haven't really done anything overseas to date, and I have done a bit of traveling since the podcast first went live in whenever that was, August, September 2015. Anyway, it's been a while. So I want to get into the habit of really sort of fishing out and finding people to do episodes with when I go overseas, when I travel. So if you've got any suggestions or any ideas, throw them my way. I'd love to hear from you, and maybe we can get a few New York specials for the podcast in I don't know when they'll come out, but maybe in March or something like that. So hit me up, let me know. But until next week, folks, thank you so much for the support. Take care. Keep those guest recommendations coming. Keep the feedback coming. Keep supporting the podcast. And thank you so much for listening. Anyway, until next week. Bye-bye. Ta-ta.